Good evening. You are looking at a picture from a balcony camera overlooking the Russian Mission Control Center in the town of Korolyov on the outskirts of Moscow, where the countdown is proceeding for launch of an unpiloted Progress resupply ship just 21 minutes from now from Site 31 at the Байконур Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. We're standing by for video from the launch site to be received here in Houston, where the flight control team here in Mission Control is standing by to work alongside with its Russian partners in overseeing not only the launch of this 75th Progress resupply ship to the International Space Station, but also its two-orbit rendezvous and docking to the aft port of the Zvezda service module about 3 hours and change after launch. Aboard the International Space Station, the Expedition 63 crew is in a split sleep shift at this hour. The two Russian cosmonauts on board who arrived on the station just a fortnight ago, Anatoly Ivanishin and Ivan Wagner, are awake. They will be awake through the docking of the Progress vehicle to the International Space Station. The commander of the International Space Station and Expedition 63, NASA's Chris Cassidy, is asleep at this hour. He is likely to be awake by the time the Progress arrives in the vicinity of the International Space Station for an expected docking 12 minutes after midnight Central Time, 1:12 a.m. Eastern Time. It's just 1 hour after sunrise at the launch site of the Байконур Cosmodrome. The Soyuz 2.1A booster on Site 31's launch pad is fully fueled, ready for launch. The countdown is proceeding on track. No issues being reported by the launch engineers in the blockhouse at Байконур. The 75th Progress resupply ship that is about to go skyward to the International Space Station is loaded with 1,543 pounds of propellant, 110 pounds of oxygen, 926 pounds of water, and almost 3,000 pounds of dry cargo, 2.78 tons of food, fuel, and supplies being delivered for the Expedition 63 crew on board the International Space Station. The launch into a two-orbit fast-track rendezvous for the Progress resupply vehicle will come at 8:51 and 41 seconds Central Time, 9:51 and 41 seconds Eastern Time. The International Space Station actually will pass directly over the Байконур Cosmodrome 41 seconds after launch and will leapfrog past the Progress, which will then be in a catch-up mode for its two-orbit rendezvous after a pre-programmed series of engine firings to not only raise the Progress's orbit to match that of the International Space Station, but to fine-tune its path to the International Outpost. It will take 8 minutes and 46 seconds from the time of launch until the Progress separates from the third stage of its Soyuz booster and begins to deploy its solar arrays and navigational antennas for the chase to catch up to the International Space Station. As mentioned, tonight's launch of the Progress resupply ship from Site 31 of the Байконур Cosmodrome, coming off the same launch pad that Chris Cassidy, Anatoly Ivanishin, and Ivan Wagner launched off of just 2 weeks ago for their four-orbit rendezvous to reach the International Space Station and the start of a 6.5-month mission on the orbital outpost. We are just 1 week past the time that the departing Expedition 62 crew, that was Oleg Skripochka and NASA astronauts Andrew Morgan and Jessica Meir, returned home for a landing on the steppe of Kazakhstan. They're back at their respective locations in Star City, Russia, and here in Houston, undergoing post-flight debriefings. The Soyuz 2.1A booster and its Progress resupply ship, encapsulated in its upper stage, rolled out to the launch pad a short distance on Wednesday morning, just after 7 a.m. Байконур time. You can see on the upper stage of the Soyuz booster the logo 75th. That is representative of the fact that this launch of the 75th Progress is coming on the 75th anniversary of the day that Soviet and American troops met at the Elbe River near Torgau in Germany, marking an important step toward the end of World War II in Europe. Marking that moment in history, the Soyuz booster is decorated today with memorial logos as it sits on the launch pad fully fueled at Site 31 Roscosmos. The Russian Federal Space Agency is calling this vehicle the Victory Rocket. That rollout took less than 40 minutes from the time it left the integration building at Site 31 until the time it was raised vertically on its launch pad, allowing launch pad technicians to hook up electrical cables and data cables to set the stage for launch, which is scheduled just 15 minutes from now. At the time of launch, the International Space Station will be flying about 260 miles above the Earth, crossing the border between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, 329 statute miles behind the Soyuz booster. And as mentioned, it will leapfrog past the Progress and the Soyuz, enabling the Progress to begin its trek to catch up to the station just 2 orbits or just over 3 hours after launch. The sequence of events following launch calls for the Soyuz's first stage separation to occur just 1 minute 58 seconds after launch. The launch shroud jettison will come at about the 3-minute 3-second mark. That will be the precursor to second stage shutdown at 4 minutes and 37 seconds, and second stage separation 10 seconds later. The third stage skirt jettisoning will occur 10 seconds after that at just under the 5-minute mark, and third stage shutdown and orbital insertion will come at the 8-minute 46-second mark, spacecraft separation just seconds after that, setting the stage for the solar array deployment and navigational antenna deployment on the Progress as it begins its journey to reach the International Space Station and to docking at 12:12 a.m. Central Time, 1:12 a.m. Eastern Time, Saturday morning. This is Mission Control Houston coming up on the 10.5-minute mark before launch. Countdown preparations are continuing at the Байконур Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan as we approach the 10-minute mark until launch. Once the Progress reaches its preliminary orbit, a series of pre-programmed engine firings will be conducted to place the Progress on a pinpoint path to the International Space Station. The so-called automated rendezvous sequence is scheduled to begin just before 10 p.m. Central Time tonight. That will enable the Progress to arrive in the vicinity of the International Space Station for a fly-around maneuver that will precisely align the forward docking probe on the Progress vehicle to the aft port of the Zvezda service module, to which the Progress will link up to just after midnight Central Time Saturday morning. Readiness reports from the blockhouse at the Байконур Cosmodrome indicate that everything is in good shape. Inside 8 minutes now. At the 7-minute mark, a key is inserted into a start mechanism, and then the key is rotated, transitioning the vehicle, the Soyuz 2.1A booster, to an automatic mode. It's essentially equivalent to a ground launch sequencer. The report from Байконур is that the Progress vehicle is now on autonomous power as we approach the 6-minute mark until launch. Down to the Байконур Cosmodrome just inside 5 minutes until launch. The activation of recorders in the Launch Control Center have been completed. Telemetry from the launch vehicle is being received. Everything is in good shape down at Байконур. We're coming up on the purging of fuel lines and other elements of the rocket engines to fireproof them by removing vapors of fuel and oxidizer. This feed now that you're seeing of the progress on the launch pad, courtesy of Roscosmos, as we are approaching the 4-minute mark. What you're seeing here is the graphic view of the Soyuz 2.1A booster on the launch pad. This is generated by real-time telemetry being received at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov as we approach the 3-minute mark until launch. Now standing by for fuel and oxidizer tanks to be pressurized. This will optimize the fuel flow to the various stages on the Soyuz 2.1A booster and to provide structural rigidity to the launch vehicle. Now just 2 minutes until launch. And now about a minute away from launch, you see the progress on the launch pad, fully fueled. Drainage has been completed. There are 2 umbilical towers that are buttressed up against the side of the Soyuz 2.1A. The first should be retracting momentarily. Standing by for the launch command. And the first of the umbilicals now retracting. Once the second umbilical retracts, that will initiate the launch command for main engine start. There goes the second umbilical. We have a go for main engine start. We have main engine start. Turbo pumps now coming up to flight speed. And liftoff. Liftoff of the 75th Progress resupply ship on a fast-track 2-orbit flight to the International Space Station. Roll, pitch, and yaw program are in. The Soyuz 2.1A booster arcing out to the northeast from the Байконур cosmodrome. All parameters are reported to be normal. The International Space Station is now flying directly over the Байконур cosmodrome. The Soyuz now moving through the period of maximum dynamic pressure, going supersonic as it heads downrange. Soyuz traveling at 2,500 miles an hour, some 15 miles in altitude now, 10 miles downrange from the Байконур cosmodrome. All parameters are reported to be normal by the engineers at the blockhouse in Байконур as we stand by for first stage shutdown and separation. And we have first stage shutdown. Second stage engines up and running in good shape. The flight is reported to be proceeding in nominal fashion. Good structural parameters being reported. The Soyuz second stage is guiding the Progress resupply ship on a precise path to its preliminary orbit. And we have reports of launch shroud jettison. All the vehicle parameters are in good shape. Good engine performance from the second stage engines. And this view from a camera on the upper stage of the Soyuz 2.1A. The Soyuz traveling now at about 7,300 miles an hour. 81 miles in altitude, 190 miles downrange from the Байконур cosmodrome. The second stage engine continues to function normally, all good structural parameters being reported. And we're standing by for second stage shutdown and separation. All good reports coming in from the blockhouse at Байконур. Good structural parameters being reported. The flight continues to proceed in nominal fashion. Yaw, pitch and roll. Good reports coming in from Байконур as the Soyuz continues to do its job. Well over halfway through its ascent to place the Progress on a path to the International Space Station. Third stage engine performance up and running in good shape as we cross the 7-minute mark into the flight. About 1 minute and 40 seconds of powered flight remaining. Animation now being generated by real-time telemetry from the Soyuz 2.1A booster, as we're about 1 minute and 15 seconds away from third stage shutdown and spacecraft separation. The Soyuz booster traveling almost 13,000 miles an hour, 122 miles in altitude, more than 600 miles downrange from the Байконур cosmodrome. Third stage engine continues to burn in perfect fashion as we cross the 8-minute mark. Good stable vehicle being reported. As soon as the Progress separates from the third stage, control of the flight of the Progress will revert back to the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov outside of Moscow. We're standing by now for third stage shutdown and spacecraft separation. And we have third stage shutdown and separation. Next event will be the deployment of the Progress's solar arrays and navigational antennas. And you see that function now in work. And all of the appendages have now been deployed, the solar arrays and the navigational antenna and the TV boom on the Progress. A perfect launch and a perfect ride to its preliminary orbit. Launch occurring at 8:51 and 41 seconds p.m. Central Time, 9:51:41 Eastern Time. A good ride uphill on the Soyuz 2.1A booster. And so the Progress chase is now on to reach the International Space Station, with docking scheduled at 12:12 a.m. Central Time, 1:12 a.m. Eastern Time. And so, about an hour or so after sunrise at the Байконур Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, the Soyuz 2.1A booster took flight, delivering the Progress resupply vehicle, the 75th Progress resupply ship, to a perfect orbit, a preliminary orbit, a series of engine firings, pre-programmed engine burns. Now we'll raise the Progress's orbit and put it on a path to reach the International Space Station. There's our first view through the Progress's external television camera. All of the Progress's systems are in excellent shape. The Progress carrying 2.78 tons of food, fuel, and supplies for the residents of the International Space Station. We will be back on the air at 11:30 p.m. Central Time, 12:30 a.m. Eastern Time with our rendezvous and docking coverage, docking scheduled again at 12:12 a.m. Central, 1:12 a.m. Eastern Time on Saturday morning. So be back with us in a couple of hours and rejoin our coverage at that time. Until then, this is Mission Control Houston.